Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Clean Libertarian Podcast. And thank you so much for bearing with me last week. I apologize. I did come down with the dreaded COVID. Put me on my tail for a few days, not going to lie, but I'm feeling much better now. Had to run its course. But I had the man flu, as what my wife would call it. And, hey, it is what it is, man, but we made it through. We're doing much better, and so thanks for your patience. And to make up for it, boy, do I have a great interview for you guys this week. This is Dr. Carl Hart. He is the author of Drug Use for Grown-Ups. This is somebody I have wanted to interview for so long. When it comes to talking about policy change, when it comes to ending the war on drugs, I can only speak from someone who does not use these substances anymore. I speak as someone who has found recovery, and that's the arena that I have, right? Like, that's the perspective that I have. Dr. Carl Hart is the opposite side of the aisle on this, where he's obviously a voice for ending the war on drugs, but he's someone who is able to use recreationally and has found a lot of success in that. And he's done a lot of research that shows, like, hey, look, man, these substances, not everybody has the same effect when they do them. Not everybody goes off and ruins their life. And he's just such an interesting person, such a courageous voice for liberty. And I got to sit down and talk to him for a little bit about his book and about kind of where he came from and how he started. And I hope you guys enjoy that. And so without any further ado, here's Dr. Carl Hart. All right, and I am here with the one and only Dr. Carl Hart. Doctor, thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with us. How are you doing this evening?
I'm good, man. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me, actually.
Yeah, man, it was a long shot that I had reaching out to you on Twitter. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I'm just beside myself that you not only acknowledged me, but that you took the time to come on here. So, for the people listening in, for the audience, Doctor, you are a professor at which university?
Columbia University.
Columbia University. You're the author of Drug Use for Grown-Ups. I know you've had a couple of other titles. You want to give us a little bit of introduction on kind of your background?
I don't know where to start. Like you point out, I'm a professor at Columbia University. I've been here for about, I guess, almost 25 years now, and I'm a researcher. I'm a professor researcher. Serve on a lot of boards, do a lot of community service. Just trying to do my part to make us better people.
Right on. And I guess we just kind of segue into it, like in the opening of your book, Drug Use for Grown-Ups, you talk about kind of like your pathway. Why don't you kind of walk us through that? Like, where did you start out with your research?
Yeah, so I started doing this research back in the early 90s. Some people might remember that in the early 90s, President Bush one, declared 1990 to 2000 the decade of the brain. And that pumped a lot of money into neuroscience research and also neuroscience training. And so I went and got a PhD in neuroscience with the idea of being able to help people who were suffering from drug addiction. I figured that I could manipulate brain mechanisms such that those people who were addicted, they would no longer be addicted, and that thereby contributing to solving the problem of drug addiction. And I thought that was one of the biggest problems facing us in the United States. In fact, in 1989, most of the American population believed that too. Of course, we got hoodwinked. That was bullshit, but we all believed it. But I got an education in neuroscience, still trying to help people who were suffering from drug addiction. But along the way, as I said, I got an education, and then I discovered that drugs were not the biggest problems facing the country. And in fact, drugs themselves were less of a problem than the way we regulate drugs. and the lies that we've told people about drugs. And those lies prevent us from helping to keep people safe, the ones who do choose to use drugs. And so after nearly 30 years of research, I'm trying to set the record straight.
Fantastic. I mean, that's that just going through that. Here's the thing is there's such a stigma that surrounds it. And you really touch on it in the book, is that responsible drug use, especially with something like heroin, with, even cocaine, it's just not looked at. People that they don't have the capacity to put that in their minds. But when we look at the history of these substances, there's a lot of history. There's a lot of provable data that a lot of people are able to imbibe and consume these substances and not have their life go off the rails. Now, I'm not one of those people. Like, I'm in recovery. Like, I have a history of rampant drug abuse. However, through my journey, through seeing, different people and being in different cultures and experiencing that, I saw plenty of people who were able to hold their responsibilities down and, like they did their thing, So I guess that kind of takes you to a place now. Like, what kind of pushback have you gotten from being this type of individual with this type of message, especially in academia?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if you know academe very well, but in academe, most of the pushback comes in a manner that is subversive, underhanded, backstabbing in a way that you don't really know who's doing what or who's saying what. So most of the, if any pushback, it's subversive, and I don't really know, nor do I care. Academics are not known to bring their beef to your face. And so I think the largest pushback that I've noticed comes from the media. Whether it's left wing, right wing, it doesn't really matter. It's the media. And the media is the most powerful industry because they can say shit about you and they don't really say it, they just imply it. And then it becomes true. And then they stop just short enough not to be sued. But the population don't really understand these sort of things. So, I mean, there's a reporter, I think his first name was Ben for New York, the New Yorker. I mean, he just lied. He did a profile on me and he just lied. I responded on Twitter and kind of took apart the lies. But this cat, I spent time with him, couple interviews, kind to him, and he's just lied. And so, like if I see somebody like that in person, I like to jack his ass up because that's just like a lie. Yeah. And so that's one of the things about the whole COVID thing too. We're not in person. And so you don't really get to face people. And then when you don't face people, people can just lie and get away with it. But the biggest pushback is that I don't know precisely what threatens people, but this notion that people can use drugs without going off the rail, that's not new. Our founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson, he loved his opioids. Many people in the country celebrate him for his writings and things that he said. I mean, but throughout history, there are a number of important people, famous people who we all love, and they use substances and they were okay. And that's all I'm saying. I mean, of course, there are people who have problems with substances. And then when we think about, particularly when you're younger, you're going to have problems, not only with substances, you have problems with a number of things. But as you get older and mature, you have some stability in your life, it decreases the likelihood that you'll have problems, not only with substances, but with a number of things in your life. We call that maturity. And so this notion that people can't use substances, whether it's heroin, whether it's marijuana, whether it's methamphetamine, whether it's MDMA, whatever it may be, the notion that people can't use these things safely and responsibly, it's crazy. And it's also anti-American. And just in terms of people being able to live their lives like they want to live their life, as long as they don't bother other people or prevent other people from doing the same. It's a fundamental sort of principle of who we say we are. If we don't believe it, well, let's stop saying that shit. Let's get rid of the Declaration of Independence. Let's get rid of all of those things if we don't believe it.
So, and that's 100% accurate. Pursuit of happiness looks a lot different for a lot of different people. And what we've seen happen, especially since the Nixon declared the war on drugs, is we have seen a very palpable path to happiness for a lot of people cut off and became criminalized. A lot of people thrown in prison, a lot of people thrown in jail who never ever actually hurt anybody. They just happened to get caught with a illicit substance. Since you've been in this work, since you've been doing this, let's go back. What for you was the defining moment that shifted your perception? Because you said that you started out from research, and was there one moment, or was it kind of a gathering of different moments for you?
Yeah, I think it built up and it culminated over time, but there were all kinds of inconsistencies. The lovely thing about science is that science, I believe, is the great equalizer in that it doesn't matter what I think, my opinions, or anybody else's opinion. It only matters what the data say. And so the data have been clear. The data, when I say data, I mean things like the vast majority of people who use any drug, whether it's heroin, whether it's marijuana, whether it's alcohol, whatever it is, the vast majority of users of drugs don't become addicted. And we've known this forever in science. And that almost never gets talked about in the mix when we start talking about drugs. There were all other kinds of inconsistencies as well in the field. One of a popular notion is that drug addiction is a brain disease, or drug addiction causes brain abnormalities and so forth. And there's virtually no data in humans that indicates this at all. And so, as someone who's trained in neuroscience, and you look at the data, and that's what we're trained to do. And to see this notion, this false notion being promulgated, it causes anybody with any sense of integrity to be concerned. And so all of these kind of inconsistencies over time, bringing people into the lab in places like Columbia, many of our important institutions around the country, we give drugs to people and we study the effects. As well we should. A country as wealthy as we are, we should know exactly what all these drugs do. And so we give these drugs, the ones that we say are so dangerous that nobody should be using. We give the hundreds and thousands of doses of these drugs every year. So do other institutions, by the way. And we don't see any of these speculations, or these stories or facts that people claim to see in the natural ecology. Not to say that they're not seeing them in the natural environment, because they may be seeing some really extreme effects, but you can't attribute those effects to those drugs alone. And because we see in the laboratory where we isolate all of these effects, drug effects, from other things, and the drugs don't cause these effects that we're seeing or that people are saying anecdotally. And this kind of discussion doesn't happen in the mainstream. And this is not to encourage people to go out and use drugs. It's just to make sure that we have truth when we're having discussions, whether it's about drugs or whether it's about some other topic. So this truth seemed a number of people, particularly in the media, I guess they don't think the American people can handle this truth. And I have some problems with that, because it's not up to them to decide what the American people can handle.
No, not at all. Personally, my own personal story is I remember the DARE officer equating weed to heroin and you'll ruin your life and blah, 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 all these lies. And I remember the first time I did weed, and no lie, the first time I did weed and nothing bad happened, I instantly had the fact in my head that they lied about this, they lied about it all. Right.
Yeah.
And not to say that like, we need to demonize this or demonize that. But like, I think if we had honest dialogue being put forth, much like what you're doing, and we made that the mainstream, you'd see a lot more people making educated decisions about what's best to put inside of their own body,
Yeah, and we would also have some safety nets in place, so we can tell people like what are the real concerns when you're using a drug, as opposed to these exaggerated lies. Because drugs, like anything, they have positive effects and negative effects, and so you tell the people the truth about what you can expect to happen negatively, and here's how you lessen those negative effects, we'd be much better off. But instead, we just say, don't do it, and therefore we won't tell you shit about this activity. And you can't. That's not how you educate people. I certainly
No.
don't. I certainly wouldn't educate my children that way.
No, not at all. Now, you make no bones about your own personal drug use. You're very open and honest about that. Did you have to really take steps to do that? Or was that just something like you started doing and you're like, I don't care anymore, I'm going to talk about it?
Yeah, that I don't know what steps that one can take. Besides, the thing is that I tried in the book not to talk about any breaking of U.S. laws, because there are places around in the world where you can use these substances without breaking criminal law. And so I tried to put myself in those places whenever I used. But in terms of what people thought about me coming out saying, of course I use heroin, of course I use MDMA, of course I use cannabis, or of course I use methamphetamine, or whatever the substance may be. I'm a researcher and I study drugs. I want to know everything about the substance, and including how it feels. And so I wasn't really concerned about what people thought. It's like I studied drugs for 30 years, and why the fuck would I care about somebody who doesn't study drugs? What their opinion is? I don't care about their opinion, because I'm the expert, not them.
Right. I love that, man. That's just out there. Let it hang, man. I like that a lot. Now, having been open about this, like, do you get any kind of hassle from local law enforcement? Like, do you have any kind of run-ins like that? Have you kind of, I don't know. I know how law enforcement operates in some parts of the country. I can imagine that this would make you open to a little bit of harassment.
No, I'm a black man in America, so I get
Well,
the typical law enforcement harassment,
right.
and I don't want to go into that so much because people have said that so much, but not for like, oh, this person's identified as a drug user, so let's harass him. So, nah, I live in New York, and then when I'm not in New York, I am out of the country, and just trying to lay low. And besides, I'm not so stupid to like have something on me. When I have come out and said, yo, I do this, I wouldn't be that stupid. But nah, so it's not, I guess the most sort of stress would be from people and the innuendos and that sort of thing. But I don't, but that's on them, not me. That nobody comes to me in my face or tell me anything that might be harsh or negative. I don't think people have that kind of courage.
Yeah, not so much anymore. We're in the keyboard era, where everybody takes their ounce of
Yeah.
courage and they put it out in the ether, but in person, it doesn't seem to translate that well,
Yeah.
Now, surely you've run across people, like, have you noticed a lot of people coming out and having the courage and strength to talk about with you, at least, about their own personal experiences since you've started this journey?
Yeah, I get tons of emails from people, and really, it's like the fuel that kind of pushes this fight forward, because there are a number of people who are suffering in silence, and they read the book and they say things like, "Thank you, I can now finally try and be honest with my wife or with my other loved ones. I've been doing this for a number of years, and shame and silence, and it's caused me all kinds of stress and emotional pain and torture. But they now feel like they are less alone." And so that's been a really good thing. But these are just kind of regular people who are alone in the world. I was expecting more people who have platforms, more people who are celebrities, more people who are captains of industries to come out. But they, for the most part, have been cowards on this. And this is what I write about in the book. I was really trying to make sure that those people who have some sort of privilege in our society come out of the closet and take some of the pressure off of the less fortunate in our society, and stand up on behalf of those people who are catching hell. And to my dismay and much to my chagrin, they haven't come out, and it's really disappointing. And it has led me to like really cut off friends and people who I know are doing their thing, but they haven't come out publicly. I won't out people; that's their own journey. But I was expecting people to come out. I have friends who are or ex-friends who are like important people in the society. You all know who they are, and they hit me up and want to know about doing some things, but yet they haven't come out. And in fact, in public, they're anti-drugs, and so it's like I can't get down like that no more.
No, man. I mean, like, that has to be incredibly frustrating. I can just imagine, even from where I am, because like I said, I'm in recovery, and I openly advocate for legalizing all substances. Like, that is my thing, and having so many other close people in recovery who will not walk this path with me, who will not share this message, like, it's kind of, we're in the same boat, I think, and having these people, it's like, dude, you used to do drugs. Like, this thing doesn't work. Like, if we had people like you're talking about, like captains of industry, notable people in the public eye who would come out and say, look, I've been using these substances since forever. Like, look how much success I've had. Like, we would do so much good with shattering that stereotype of the back alley guy stuck in a cardboard box, blasting off by candlelight. That stereotype has to be smashed, and it doesn't happen unless these people come forward.
Yeah, and then it also, if they come forward, then we can really talk about how do we keep people safe. I mean, what strategies have you used? What strategies do you use? We just had the brother Michael K. Williams died a few days ago, the guy who plays Omar on The Wire. And it's been speculated that it was drug-related death. And we know in New York and a number of cities, opioids, for example, heroin, are tainted with things like fentanyl and other potentially more potent substances, making them potentially more dangerous when people don't know if the substance contains fentanyl. And then if people come out of the closet, we can have an honest conversation about how do we keep people safe? The ones who will use, the ones who may have gone to treatment in the past, may have fallen off the wagon or what have you, but it doesn't mean that they should die.
No.
And we don't have that conversation, and in part because of these cowards in the closet.
Absolutely. I mean, there's no reason anybody needs to die from every single one of those cross contamination or, drug poisoning or overdose. I mean, you've seen the statistics, especially, I mean, what we've seen skyrocket since 2020, those are all useless or needless deaths that did not need to occur.
Yeah, it's an important thing to point out, though, that as I noted in the book, the way that they count those statistics have kind of changed over the years, and it makes artificially inflates those numbers. Now, there are people who are dying from drug-related overdose, and that's important. And we should make sure we do everything to make sure people are safe. But I just want people to understand that when they inflate these numbers, they are doing this to grab your attention to say that we should ban opioids or ban some drug. And that's wrong. And I point this out in the book, and I show how these numbers are being inflated. And I also show who's actually doing the death investigations. Most of the people who are doing the death investigations have like a high school diploma. I know people think that medical examiners, that those are physicians with special training in pathology, are doing the death investigations. But most of the folks doing death investigations around the country are high school graduates. That's the requirement in most places for people who are coroners. And if there's an opioid on board or suspected, they're counting that as an opioid related death. And, you know, the fact is, it's kind of difficult to die from a single opioid alone, except for something like fentanyl, but like heroin and a number of these drugs, it's difficult to die from just a single opioid. So you have drug combinations and other things going on, but that's not what the headlines tell you. Again, we missed the opportunity to educate people, to help people stay safe. And that's the thing that it just infuriates me.
Do you think that that's by design, or is that just kind of how it's morphed into as far as data collection goes?
You know, I don't know if anybody is actually saying like, we should probably kill off these people. I don't think that's what's happening. What I think is happening is that the public officials are seeing who are dying and thinking that, well, we don't really need to change anything that we're doing because the folks who are dying, for the most part, are people who we don't give a shit about anyway. That's what I think. And it also allows them to say, we're going to pump more money into law enforcement. And so that's a base that they all want. Law enforcement has never solved any complicated problem. And so we put more money in law enforcement. And then they say we put more money in treatment. Again, treatment and law enforcement, they're the same. The physicians in this area are largely law enforcement with stethoscopes. Those two groups are happy, and the politicians look like they did something by putting more money in law enforcement, more money in treatment, and they pretend to have done something. And then, of course, the people who write TV shows, movies, comedians, all of them, they all benefit from this nonsense because they can talk about drugs in this simplistic, stupid way in which they've always talked about drugs. When you think about writing characters for movies, if somebody uses heroin or someone uses crack, you don't have to develop the character. Somebody sells those drugs, you don't have to develop. We don't have to know anything about their background. All we know is that they're bad, and that is what happens in this lazy sort of environment when you have the lazy writers, and so all of these people are benefiting. That's why it stays the same. They all are financially benefiting. As I said in the past, this war on drugs is the biggest, best jobs programs we've ever had in the United States. And so I'm asking them to stop this jobs program. And politicians are not willing to do that.
No, not at all. I really got to applaud you on the law enforcement with the stethoscope like that. There's nothing closer to the truth than that. I advocate 12-step recovery. I also advocate, recovery of any sort, as long as it's doing something good for the person. However, like in your book, I think you call it parasitic treatment facilities. And that's exactly what we see happening. You see a lot of people profiting off of things like drug court, profiting off of these judge mandates in order to, you got to go to counseling, you got to go to this, got to go to that. Well, I mean, there's a lot of people making a lot of money off of these policy.
Absolutely.
I've also seen something as little as like a halfway house that started out well that turned into money in no time at all. People profiting off of the suffering of others, and it's disgusting. At the end of the day, a lot of folks go to treatment and they tell them just end up going to AA or NA, and those meetings are free, man. Like that's addicts, that's us, that's I say us like in the personal sense, like me and my friends all meeting up and making sure that those doors are open. None of us are getting paid. None of us are profiting off of that. We're there to help another person out. So at the end of the day, when you see a judge mandating that, you see a treatment center mandating that, it's all these people admitting like, we don't have the answer, but these other people do, but we are damn sure going to tax you along the way, and it's frustrating. It's really frustrating because sure, we do end up getting some people in, but that also puts a bad taste in the mouth for a lot of folks.
Yep. No, absolutely. I absolutely agree. This is why I wrote the book, to try and help people to understand what's really going on. And then I tried to use myself as an example of somebody who can use these substances and has used these substances and then turn into these kind of things that people say. But again, I'm 54 years old. I have all of these responsibilities. And I have seen the war on drugs from a number of positions. I was in the military for 4 years. I was doing the science, still am at this highest level. Really, I'm one of these people who want to see things kind of be stable, and because I'm doing well in society, and I don't want to tear it down. But they have tried to say that I'm like a radical person, which is like fucking crazy. I mean, you don't get to be a dreadlock black scientist at Columbia being radical. That shit just doesn't happen. But people have tried to do that. So I just wish your listeners just read the book. Don't read the headlines. Don't read what other people say. Read the book, and I promise you will have a wealth of knowledge.
Absolutely. One thing I did want to ask you about is, we've seen kind of a paradigm shift in the way that society as a whole has approached marijuana. Cannabis is looked at very favorably, especially with the more states that, we're seeing legalized or medicinal. Like, what do you think is the next substance to go that way? And how does that happen?
Well, I think we're seeing it with some psychedelics, right? Psilocybin. People talk about ayahuasca, which is active ingredient is DMT. So I think we're seeing it with those compounds, and I think one of the reasons that we're seeing it with those compounds is because many of the writers, the people who are influential in the media, like those compounds. They can say that these are good drugs. These are like the drugs where we are not getting high, we are seeking a higher plane. We're on a spiritual journey. Some nonsense that this language that people put on the substance when they're doing exactly the same thing that somebody is doing if they're using heroin or cocaine or whatever drug. But those people are the ones who are writing the articles. They are the ones who are writing the TV shows. They are the ones who are influencing what the society is thinking. And so the same thing happened with cannabis. Cannabis, of course, should be legal. I'm not arguing that it shouldn't, but we have to wait until this group of people in the United States think that the substance is cool. And the substance separates them from the masses. And so they say, we don't get high. We're on a spiritual journey. We're seeking this higher plane, this bullshit that they say, but people buy it. And if you read your papers, and you'll see this. And this is no disrespect for people who actually use those substances and enjoy them. This is to point out the hypocrisy.
Since we brought up ayahuasca, in your research, have you found any credence to the idea that in a seriously drug addicted mentality or person, that these substances have any real shot at resetting the brain chemistry?
Well, I think when people start talking about resetting the brain chemistry, you can stop listening, because that's like nobody's really measuring. I don't know how you measure that. That's just. But the fact is, though, there are people who like take ayahuasca for the first time, and they have this sort of awakening, or for lack of a better word, or they have this desire to change or not to do that, and that's a good thing. But when they start attributing this effect to some specific mechanism in the brain, it's bullshit. People haven't researched that. They haven't seen that. And then people say, well, it's an effect on behavior, so it's got to happen in the brain. It's like, yeah, this is true. Like you and I are having this conversation, and I'm learning from talking to you and vice versa. There are things happening in the brain that are changing the brain, of course, but it doesn't give us any information if we don't know precisely what those things are. But we do know that we are changed because of the conversation. It's far more important to focus on that, as opposed to some mythical or some mythical sort of brain change that we don't know about, or we don't know the specifics of. And so I think that it's a good thing that some people find ayahuasca or some other psychedelic helpful, and they should understand that other people find MDMA or heroin helpful, and not be hating on those people because their drug is different from theirs.
Good point. Very good point. Now, I know that, you do a lot of research, analytical stuff. Do you get involved in any policy at all? Like, are you involved in politics to that degree, or do you kind of stay out of that arena?
Yeah, I try to stay out of that arena because I hate politicians. It's like the politicians. We haven't had any real courageous politicians. Well, there are some people who are trying, and so I don't want to diss all of them. But the vast majority of our national politicians are fucking cowards. And so I try to educate the people who vote for them, because the politicians will go the way of the voter. And so if I am able to influence the voters, then I've done my job. But I don't want to waste my time on politicians. People like me who talk to politicians are there because they are stargazing, or they just want to be next to what they perceive as power. But we all know that the power really lays with the people. And so if you ain't doing the job of educating the people, fuck you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That mentality has to change before the policy ever will. It's just the way that it is, and you're doing a phenomenal job with it, man. And I just applaud you. Is there anything else that you wanted to plug before we kind of wrapped up here? I think that's about all that I had, man. Like I said, there's only so much that I can talk about and push for on my end when I educate people. And when I have these conversations, I have to come from it from the very specific angle that I have. My perspective is mine. And you offer something so unique that I'm not able to, that I've been absolutely beside myself anytime I get somebody to just buy your book and read it and get to talk to them about it. Like, man, you're opening a lot of eyes.
Well, thank you. And that's the thing. I just hope people buy the book, because people would like to silence it. And I need folks to buy it, to show folks that the people who are making these decisions, that people are starving for this kind of information.
Absolutely, man. Well, I will continue to push it. Now, do you have anything else in the works right now, or is this kind of like where you're at with it? You're just pushing this one.
This just came out this year, and I'm still deciding what I'll write about next. But this is the main thing. I think like this is the most important thing I ever have done, and I think that it's going to have so many legs throughout history. And so I just hope I live long enough to see it happen, because I know it's going to happen, because it's just, I read these other books out here on this topic. I listen to what other people are saying, and they're not even close. And so sometimes you get too far ahead of the current population and time, but I can only be where I'm at, and this is where I'm at.
Well, you're a pioneer, man. I mean, like this book, this journey that you're on, this represents a benchmark in the fight against these draconian policies and laws that we've had for so long. And I just look forward to seeing where you go with it, man.
Thank you, man. And thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And keep doing your thing, bro.
Absolutely. Well, you have a good one, Doctor. We will talk to you later.
All right. Take care.
All right. There you have it. Like I said, guys, he is just a phenomenal voice for liberty. And if you have the ability, go buy. No, you know what? Go get the ability. How about that? Go buy the man's book, Drug Use for Grown-Ups. You can get the Kindle version on Amazon. It's in all the major bookstores. This is such a phenomenal read. This is someone who has done their due diligence in studying these substances, studying their effects on the human mind. And this is a conversation that we as a society need to have. We would do so well to kind of shatter this stereotype that we've put on drug use for so long. And once again, thank you so much, Dr. Carl Hart, for coming on and sharing with us. And so, yeah, that's it, guys. Thanks a lot for tuning in. Be sure and check us out next week. And Song of the Week, just going to go in with Pat the Bunny. I played one of his songs in the past. I don't think I've played this one. This one's called More About Alcoholism. Just a fun little kind of, punkish song, folk punk song. But anyway, here is More About Alcoholism by Pat the Bunny.